Welcome to the All Things Nintendo podcast. I'm Brian Shea from Game Informer, and this is a weekly podcast to discuss all the biggest news and games from the world of Nintendo. It is a massive week for Switch owners, as perhaps the most anticipated game of the year hits this very day. That's right, this main segment is going to be all about Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. You'll hear our full impressions later on in the show, but first we have a bit of news to cover. To do that and a whole lot more, I have invited Game Informer's magazine content director, Kyle Hilliard, on the show. Kyle, how are you?
No longer a recurring guest, now a proper employee, I think.
Yeah, so this is your first time on the show as an employee of Game Informer. It's not your first time on the show. I think this is your third time on All Things Nintendo.
And not my first time as a Game Informer employee in my life.
But your first time on All Things Nintendo as a Game Informer employee.
Yeah, it's not confusing.
It's very, very straightforward. Nobody will ever be confused by this. But yeah, welcome back to the Game Informer team. I know it's been a few weeks at this point, but yeah, everybody who just listens to this show and has never even heard of Game Informer, they don't know what I'm even talking about in the intro every week. But yeah, how does it feel to be back?
It's been good, man. It's been nice. Some things are completely different. Many things are very much the same. It's kind of comforting in a strange way. It's been good. I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying all the new folks. I've been putting up with the old folks. you and Matt and Lele and Margaret.
It's so weird to be like lumped in with the old folks when I still like, even though I've been at Game Informer for 8 years, I feel like I'm still like one of the new kids in town, but like I'm the second longest tenured member of Game Informer editorial at this point, and it's very weird.
Gosh, maybe I might take that from you now. We'd have to do the math.
Yeah, I don't know how that works out.
There might be a technicality there, but yeah, it's weird.
I'm going to throw out the word consecutive.
There you go.
There we go. But, we have a lot to cover in this episode. And first things first, though, we have a big anniversary to celebrate, Kyle. I think the first time I had you on All Things Nintendo, it was to talk about Wii U games we wanted to come to Switch. And this time, I'm having you on to talk about the Wii U turning 10 years old. Here we go! It is, it's considered by many the greatest Nintendo console, I think.
Well, it's not the worst. It doesn't have that title.
It may be the worst Nintendo console if you want to consider Virtual Boy I don't know what you would consider Virtual Boy. It was
tabletop.
It was the first Nintendo hybrid system.
Yeah,
it was the predecessor to the Switch, much in the way the Wii U was.
Let me start off by saying I actually there's a lot I like about the Wii U. It's not in terms of just like a playable console. It's not the disaster everyone thinks it is. It wasn't widely adopted. It didn't sell very well. But like as a functional console that you played games on, I thought there was some fun, creative stuff on there.
I would agree with you, actually. I was always one of the bigger Wii U defenders in the office, like before the Switch came out. Everybody would just kind of like would write it off like, oh, it's the failed Nintendo console that we're just kind of in limbo with until whatever they put out next. And, that was true to an extent. But there are a lot of really great games on the Wii U. And, I'm not a big fan of the form factor of it. The gamepad felt like I was playing with one of those like fake video game Fisher-Price toys that you can buy for little kids, like before they know how to hold a game controller. But like, other than that, like, there was a lot of cool stuff about the Wii U. But I want to talk a little bit about what your experience was with the launch of the Wii U.
Yeah, let me think back. I remember the first time I played it was at E3. Which was like the E3 before it launched. That's where they had it there on hand to try. And I played Ninja Gaiden. And I think at that point, the hardware that I played didn't even have the proper control stick yet. It still had that sort of sliding pad that the 3DS used.
Thank God they moved on from that.
Yeah. So I that was the first time I touched it. And I was intrigued by it because I still kind of like the idea of like, the dual screen kind of TV monitor in your palm kind of gameplay. And then so that was like my very first experience with, gosh, I wonder if I could even go find on the site. I probably have like a Ninja Gaiden Wii U preview or something. And then I remember getting it in the office, which I was really excited about. I remember people were strangely pessimistic. I remember me and Dan Reichert, who was at Game Informer at the time, were both particularly excited because it was new Nintendo hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exciting. It doesn't really matter what it is. We're excited about new Nintendo hardware. And
Because new
then
Nintendo hardware brings new Nintendo software, which is often
right.
amazing.
Yeah, and we booted up Nintendo Land, and that game was really cool as like an introduction. Two things: as an introduction to the Wii U, right, and also with a group of people that you like. It is a good multiplayer experience. It's also a unique one in some cases, like that you really just can't have anymore. There's a reason Nintendo Land hasn't been ported to Switch, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be a different game at that point. So, I mean, to summarize, a positive first impression of the Wii U. We had, it was really exciting to get new Nintendo hardware. It was different. And then we played a bunch of Nintendo Land multiplayer and had a blast.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think, a lot of people's experience. Nintendo Land was packed in with the higher price point model of Switch. I guess it was, there was the base model, which had a smaller hard drive. It was white. And then there was a black model that was a little bit more expensive. It came with, like, I think a 32 gigabyte hard drive, which,
Yeah.
it was even back then,
It's a
it was
joke.
like, that's a super tiny hard drive, but whatever. Nintendo games are like 100 kilobytes or whatever. So who cares? And then it also came with Nintendo Land, and that was the model that I picked up. Was that the one you got as well?
Yes. The black one, yeah, with the
Mm-hmm.
extra hard drive space in Nintendo Land. Yeah, yeah.
And I remember I didn't spend hardly any time with Nintendo Land. I put it in and I was like, oh, this is cool. But when I went, so my experience at the launch of the console was I was living on the East Coast at the time in Maryland, and I knew that there was a launch happening, and I got invited by Nintendo PR to come up to Nintendo World, New York, the store at Rockefeller Plaza, and they were doing a big like, hey, we're going to sell the first Wii U in the United States here, and Reggie's going to ring them up and everything. And it
He
was
had to
like
learn the POS system and all.
yeah, I guess he did, because he was like scanning it, and he was like, all right, that'll be like,
Oh, that's
but
funny.
I think like it was like $500 something because the guy bought like 5 games with it. And yeah, and it was cool. That was the first time I ever met Reggie, so that was fun.
Oh,
And
nice.
then they had like a big like party out in like the plaza, where it was like there were a bunch of like Mii's just roaming the streets, and it was really creepy. They're very unsettling to see in real life. Like they're just like
Like
these giant, like,
mascot
yeah, like
costume kind
mascot
of thing?
Mii's. I
Ah.
still have a bunch of pictures that I could share with it since we're on the 10-year anniversary. I guess that would be something I could tweet out or whatever. But it was fun, and like, it was a big media event. Like I was getting some photos, and like I got quotes from Reggie about like, how he views like a launch event like that at Nintendo World, as opposed to like just like kind of like, oh yeah, it's available everywhere. But it was a fun time, and it was one of like those events that it's like, oh, this could be something big, and then like it sold so poorly. But I didn't even get my Wii U at that event, because I was like, well, I'm in Maryland, I'm gonna have to like ride a bus back home, so I'm not gonna bring a Wii U with me. I had it pre-ordered at a store down the road from me, and I remember I got so I got the Nintendo Land pack in, and I got New Super Mario Brothers U, and that was where I put all my time. That was one of the, I think that was the launch title most people were excited for. But the lineup featured 23 games, and that sounds pretty robust, but a lot of them are kind of like ports from consoles and the games that came out from like 2 years ago. Like Mass Effect 3 was a big one for some reason, and
Yeah,
Batman
Batman.
Arkham
Yeah.
City Armored Edition or whatever it was called. And the big ones that I jotted down here were Nintendo Land, which we already talked about, New Super Mario Brothers U, and Zombie U, which was one that a lot of people were excited about. That was a zombie game from Ubisoft. And basically the convention there was like you would have to look down at the second screen and like enter pin codes or pick locks and stuff, and like as you're doing that, like you'd look up and the zombie would be coming towards you on the main screen. And it was a cool novelty, because like taking your eyes off the screen when you're playing a video game, the main screen that we're so conditioned to look at, was such like a thing where we had to almost like trick our brains. So it added
Do
to
you
the
want to
tension.
guess Game Informer's review score for that game, Brian?
6.5.
5.
Okay, so I was in the neighborhood.
Yeah, Tim Turner did not like that game.
Yeah, I actually never played it. I remember they ported it over and they ported it to like Xbox One and PS4, and it was
Yeah.
just called Zombie. They took off the U, which
Oh, yeah,
I
makes
guess that
sense.
makes sense. But then it was just called Zombie, and it's like what is the why like what how are they going to market this? It's like one of the worst SEO games of all time. Like it's up there with Control because you can type Control and there's a billion things that pop up before it.
Right.
Type Control video game and you get like game controllers. It's impossible to Google that game unless you type like Control Remedy video game. But do you remember what you picked up with your Wii U?
Gosh, I mean, I got some stuff from Game Informer, right? Like, I think I did like a little, not a full review, but just like a quick feedback on Batman. It was, and yeah, Nintendo Land was mostly what I played because I played with my kid who was very young at the time. Did not, I started Mario U, Super Mario, what's it called? Super Mario Brothers U?
New
Is that
Super
what it's
Mario
called?
Brothers
Yeah.
U.
Yeah, I did not like it. Like, I never got very far in that one. I just thought it was a weak sort of entry in that new Mario Brothers canon, I guess. So that one didn't
You
really
know,
click with me.
I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing when I played it on Wii U, and then they released it on Switch, New Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe, and I actually liked it a lot more, like years removed from the original launch.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's something about that. It was also the multiplayer was like they were trying to let you play with the gamepad screen and like another player can make platforms for you, and it was just, I don't know, it just ended up kind of like mostly they would just make platforms that got in your way, and it was like, I don't know, this is just not clicking for me. But yeah, Nintendo Land weirdly just as a Mario Chase in particular, I just was like fun. Like it's one that I even think about occasionally these days. Where I'm like, oh, it would be kind of a fun novelty to boot up Nintendo Land and play some Mario Chase in the year 2022.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of games that I remember very fondly from the Wii U, but are there like speaking directly to the gamepad itself, what was kind of the biggest I guess the best utilization of the game? Because you can think of things that used it terribly, like Zombie U. Maybe a lot of people weren't fond of that. Star Fox Zero, I think that was just a terrible use of the gamepad. And I maintain it would be a better game on Switch. But what games do you think used it the best?
Splatoon, I
Yep.
think. It's very simple. It was just like you look down at your hands and you can kind of get a better sense of the battlefield
Hmm.
because it would just display the map, right? And when you're playing it on Switch, you press, I don't know what button, the X button to
It's
pull
either
up the
X or
map.
Y. Yeah.
Yeah, and like to have that map just live on the screen was great. And then the other Super Mario Maker, I think,
Mm.
was much better on Wii U than Switch, because it was just you could sort of draw levels and things like that. It had a lot of more touchscreen interactivity that was interesting. And then Rayman Legends was the other one that I think used it really well.
Oh, I never played that on Wii U.
It's
Interesting.
the best version of Rayman Legends, which is a fantastic game, is the Wii U version.
I always remember loving the way the Zelda games. Yeah, the Wii U never got an exclusive Zelda game aside from I guess that no, it didn't. It never got an exclusive
Nope.
Zelda game. I almost said Link's Crossbow Training, and then I thought it out, and I was like, oh wait, no, that was literally a Wii Remote Zapper game that was on the Wii. But yeah, like so we got Twilight Princess HD, Wind Waker HD, and then you got the inventory in the bottom there, which was amazing. So you didn't have to like go into the pause screen. You're just like, all right, I need to equip this, and you just
Yeah, that
tap
was
it on your
nice.
screen.
Yeah.
And that was an amazing innovation. I wish there was some way they could do that on the Switch because that was just such a convenience when you're playing through a Zelda game. And then they put out Breath of the Wild on Wii U and Switch. And because they didn't want the Wii U version to be better than the Switch version, I mean, theoretically, that's why they did it. There's no inventory on that second screen, right?
No, there's like nothing happening on that second screen. Like literally, I think it's black. And honestly, people are not upset about that enough. Honestly, like you know what I mean. Like the Wii U version of Breath of the Wild should be more interesting, and because the game was developed with Wii U in mind first, so they clearly were, had ideas where they were going to integrate that touchscreen in interesting ways that they just cut when they decided to go over to Switch. Um, and I think it's okay to be upset about that.
Yeah, and I never played the Wii U version because when you were reviewing it for us back in 2017, you reviewed the Switch version, obviously, but you did check out the Wii U version, and you're like, yeah, there's literally nothing different aside from maybe some of like the sound effects are a little bit worse, and that's it.
Yeah, I remember because I didn't play a ton of the Wii U version, but I remember I beelined to like some of the areas where there was like the most potential slowdown, like the thickest woods and stuff like that. And it was like this frame rate stuttered a little bit more on Wii U compared to Switch, but it's like if that was your only option to play Breath of the Wild, like it was a fine alternative to playing on Wii U. It worked.
And I remember like a big deal was this was Nintendo's first HD console. Because remember, the
Right.
Wii was not HD. Obviously, the 3DS was not HD. So the fact that this was like bringing Mario and Zelda into HD, I was at like a Best Buy. They were doing like a pre-launch event, and it was like just showing off, like, hey, here's some like games running on Wii U, and you could go play them and stuff. And like some guy was like, I don't know what it is about like Nintendo, but the games just look so much cooler when they're in HD. And I was just like, they kind of do. Like something about like Mario in HD seemed really cool at the time.
Yeah, Pikmin, I feel like was the best use of that. Was like, going to HD really benefited it with the environments and the weird objects and everything.
You could differentiate the little Pikmin a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the Wii U was not the success that Nintendo was hoping for. It only sold 13.5 million units in its lifetime. And, Kyle, stop me if you've heard this one before, but its highest selling piece of software, Mario Kart 8.
What a surprise.
What a surprise. But we talked about last week that I think Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on Switch has now sold like 48 million copies or something like that. And for reference, the Switch outsold the Wii U in just 10 months, and to this point sold over 114 million units. So more than
Jeez.
100 million units additional on top of what the Wii U sold is what the Switch has sold. So it's a little bit more of a success, I would say, than the Wii U at this point.
Yeah, right. It's an understatement.
And Kyle, we are going to be dedicating a bit more time to the Wii U's 10th anniversary a little later in the show. But do you have anything else you'd like to say about this console before we move on to the news?
It is the best console for like virtual console. Like I don't think I'll ever get rid of mine because I own a lot of Game Boy Advance and a lot of DS games on it. And it's also, my backwards compatible Wii system as well. So like it's a good one to keep around for historical reasons. I think you can still go online and buy like virtual console games, which I was kind of considering doing a run and like spending some money and being like, let me get all the DS games I can, because I don't know if there's going to be another way to play these anytime soon. You know
That's
what I
the
mean?
challenge, right? Because the
Yeah.
second screen you could emulate the DS, and they never did it, but the 3DS experience as well.
Yeah.
And that was such a smart use of the gamepad as well, because you can't do that on the Switch. Anything that requires a second screen just needs to either never come to Switch or needs to be heavily modified.
Yeah, like I have Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks on there. Like that's the best way to play those games in 2022.
Yeah, and it's a shame that I don't know how they're ever going to bring it over to Switch or whatever comes after Switch, unless they have some sort of second screen experience. But I think that's a pretty decent look at the Wii U on its 10th anniversary. Kyle, we're going to jump into some news, and the main segment here is going to be Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I've played a lot of that game. You've played a good amount of it as well. But as is tradition, we are going to start with some other Pokemon news. And the first one is Pokemon Trading Card Game. Did you ever play the Pokemon Trading Card Game online app that existed for, I guess, like 10 years at this point?
For iPad, right?
So it was on iPad, it was on PC and Mac, and I guess Android tablets as well. But anyway, tablets and computers was basically what that was left to.
A little bit. I'm not a big Pokemon card game player. I don't really know the rules or understand it, but I have a child, so I've certainly, had my experience with the cards, and we played with the app a little bit. And I also have a memory of them bringing the app to Game Informer before it launched, and us being really like not enamored with the app, but just the idea, because it was Nintendo's first foray into like there's a Nintendo thing coming to iOS.
Mm-hmm.
And like that was way before Super Mario Run and that big push that they made and Mario Kart and stuff like that. And we were just like, I guess this is the dam gates opening. Nintendo stuff's coming to iOS, but it was like it really ended up not being that at all. Which
Hey,
was
we
weird.
got Miitomo.
But I'm saying that was like years before that even. Like we were like, I remember them showing it to us in the office, and we were like, I was like, yeah, this is fine, but like the big thing here is like Nintendo is on iOS. This is crazy. And then
Yeah.
it was like then years later we saw Mitomo and stuff like that.
Yeah, we got Mitomo, we got Fire Emblem, what was it called? Fire Emblem Heroes?
Yeah.
Pokemon Go, obviously. Super Mario Run. Talked about a lot.
I mean, yeah, it really sort of
Mario Kart
cements
Go.
that idea that I'm sure you and I both kind of learned more and more over the years, that there's actually, when you get into the nitty gritty of it, there's actually quite a bit of separation between Nintendo and Pokemon Company. Like people put them hand in hand, but on the business side of things and the decisions that are made, they're pretty separate, actually.
Yeah, Nintendo's like a part owner of it, but Pokemon Company,
they're a distributor of the game. Yeah,
it's a weird relationship. Like I remember when you guys wrote some history piece, or you specifically wrote the history piece. You went on a trip to Game Freak, and this was like 2017, 2018, something like that.
Yeah,
and you tried to break down like the relationship between Game Freak, Pokemon Company, creatures, and Nintendo, and it was just like this incredibly tangled web that nobody could comprehend by the time we were done with the explanation.
Yeah, Junichi Masuda like pulled up a whiteboard and was drawing Venn diagrams and stuff, and it was like, I don't know if something's getting lost in translation here or what, but I still don't get it.
If only you had James Turner, the art director,
right.
Maybe he could have drawn a better image for you.
He was probably around. I think he was in the office somewhere.
Yeah, he drew Vanillite for us when
nice.
Ben Hansen and I went. We had him sketch it for us live on camera, and that was the first Pokemon really cool. I think he ever designed for a Pokemon game. But the news here is that we have a new Pokemon trading card game experience for iOS and Android, and also PC Mac. And that is Pokemon Trading Card Game Live. The beta is now available globally, and now it's not only on tablets, PC, and Mac, it's also on mobile devices, Kyle, which I think is a huge jump in the right direction, especially when you look at how Marvel Snap has been blowing up. This is something that has always held me back. It's I don't know. I don't use my iPad as much as I use my phone especially for gaming. I don't know, something about the phone just sits so perfectly in my hand. And it seems like it's the right fit for a game like this. And I am shocked it took this long. I think it's been promised as coming soon for 2+ years at this point. So I'm glad it's finally out now. But I did get my hands on it. It seems like a pretty big upgrade in both presentation and functionality. But I think they also, in the time since Pokemon Trading Card Game Online launched, they have discovered that monetization is something that the last app was missing, because for this version, they implemented a more robust store, and there's even a battle pass that you can buy now. So there are upgrades, and it seems like there's some give and take. I don't know how the progression is in terms of fairness, unfairness for the battle pass, but unfortunately, the biggest thing I was hoping for fell through completely. They blew it on the QR code reading capabilities. So I don't know when the last time you bought a physical pack of Pokemon cards was. Each pack, each box, whatever you buy, however you buy your Pokemon cards, they come with a little insert, and there's a QR code on it, and it says hey, you bought a physical pack of Pokemon cards. If you scan this QR code or enter this code, you can have it in the Pokemon Trading Card Game Live. And, I was able to import all the cards that I had already done that for with online into Live when I transferred my account over to this beta. But I was okay, hopefully they have a better QR code system, because I used to have to hold them up individually one by one to my webcam, my PC webcam. I couldn't do it on my phone or anything like that. I have literal hundreds and hundreds of these cards, and I've been holding off on doing it. And I was waiting for this Live app to go live, and it says hey, do you want to scan some cards? And I said, yeah. And it takes me to the exact same website, and it is such a hassle. You can only enter 5 codes at a time, and the QR code reader it takes forever. It's I'm fine, I'll just type it in. That's how I feel every time I go do it. So I'm hoping that there's an upgrade to that system, because I literally have a full drawer of these cards, and I have not done anything with them, just waiting for a better way to do it. And I don't know if it's ever coming.
Yeah, that sounds frustrating. That's annoying.
It's very frustrating. But anyway, the app seems like an upgrade in a lot of ways. But the Pokemon Trading Card Game Live global beta is live now on iOS and Android, PC, and Mac. And it's just in time for the new games to hit, which we're going to be talking about later. But Kyle, there's some extra Pokemon news, and I think we'll give a spoiler alert here, but it's all over social media. It's all over uh, everything. I mean, the BBC covered it, for Christ's sake. And that is Ash Ketchum from the anime has finally become the Pokemon World Champion. Did you
Proud of
see
him.
that news?
Yeah. One of my favorite jokes people were making was like, because the show's been on for like 20 years, but
25,
Ash is
I believe.
25, and Ash is still, he's 11 years old, right?
10, I think.
10 or 11, and it's like, it's hey, they finally found that when you apply for a job, they finally found that 10-year-old with 25 years of experience. It's like,
that's a very good joke. I was going to make a joke about how, like, it took the 10-year-old 25 years, but he finally did it. But, that's a very good joke, and I'll just give it to them.
But yeah, it's a wild thing. What does that mean for the anime, honestly? Does that mean there's a new protagonist on the way? Or
I think it must, right?
I mean, it's time, but it just seems like so crazy after this long to jump protagonists. I don't envy the person who the character that tries to fill Ash's stupid hat.
Stupid hat. I mean, which one? He's had so many different hats.
That's true. The dumbest one is the one.
The dumbest.
About.
Oh yeah, that one. But yeah, like, he started out as a kid who couldn't win a gym battle. Because remember, like, in the first season of the anime, he would go from gym to gym, and like he would help them out with something. He would lose the battle horribly, and then he would get like, oh, I saved the gym from a fire that Team Rocket started, and they'll be like, oh, thanks so much for saving my Pokemon. Here's the badge. And I've lost the battle. Yeah, but you won our hearts and minds. And like that was how like everything would happen. Like he would never win a battle legitimately. It was so frustrating to watch that first season of the anime. But yeah, he's the champion, so that's great news. But I believe that they did say a long time ago, like that, we want him to lose because that gives you something to strive for the next season, and that allows us to keep making these new seasons. So the fact that he is winning now, or he has won, so he also won in the Sun and Moon series, but it's not considered like the world championship. He was just like the Alola League champion or whatever. But now he actually is like the Pokemon League world champion. So I guess that would serve as like a fitting end cap. Maybe we get like an epilogue season or something. But also, the series just fairly recently made the jump to Netflix. So I'm wondering if Netflix would like want to pressure them to like keep this very popular character at the forefront of the series, but who knows?
I mean, Netflix is powerful in the entertainment industry, but they have zero sway over the direction of Pokemon's narrative, right? I mean, they're just licensing the show.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I can't imagine they would have all. Yeah, I mean, also, I mean, if the Pokemon Company gets like an email that's like, "Hey, let's keep Ash around," they'd be like, delete,
delete, and also delete from all of the Netflix servers because Pokemon has a lot of power. It turns out, and also I think that just having like that Pokemon logo would get people to watch, and maybe throw Pikachu on there for good measure, and yeah, it's not going to lose any viewers, I don't think.
Yeah, although I mean, this isn't like a crazy anime thing, I mean, like Dragon Ball has shifted its focus away from Goku. It's at some point Naruto's like a dad now. He's like the secondary character. Like Ash can still hang around, and while they focus on somebody else, that's not a crazy unheard of thing in the world of anime.
He's now the 10-year-old elder statesman of the Pokemon world.
Yeah, that's right. They'd have to suddenly fast forward quite a bit for him to be like a father.
They should have that story arc, like it just like have like an Avengers Endgame style, like just black screen after he wins, and it just says 15 years later.
Yeah.
But I think that's all the Pokemon news until the main segment. But Kyle, we have a new stage coming to Splatoon 3. Called Brinewater Springs.
Oh, okay.
And it looks like it has branching paths, let you decide if you want to take the high or low route, and it is coming to Splatoon 3 alongside Flounder Heights from Splatoon 1 on December 1st, and then that update includes those two maps. It also has new weapons and modes like X Battles and Big Run, and Big Run seems to be that thing that they hinted at pre-launch where they're like, oh, it's when the Salmonids invade the world of the Inklings and Octolings. So I don't know if that is going to change anything, but it seems like a variant of Salmon Run at this point. But
Mhm.
I don't think, have we talked about Splatoon 3 at all together?
No, I
Are
don't
you a
think
fan
so.
of Splatoon at this point, or have you kind of moved on
Yeah,
from that?
I like Splatoon. I don't really like multiplayer games in general. I don't really get into them in a big way, but I played through the campaign of Splatoon 3 and really loved it. The end, like the last hour or two of Splatoon 3's single player campaign is like fantastic.
It's
Like
terrific, yeah.
we should really like it's one of those like best moment of the years kind of like consideration discussion kind of thing, like that's how much I loved it.
Yeah, I've always vouched for the single player of Splatoon, and I feel like Splatoon 3 was maybe the best of the entire series.
Yeah, I think it is like pretty handily.
Did you play the Octo expansion of Splatoon 2?
I didn't. No.
Okay, so that has, I mean, that's almost exclusively a single player expansion. So if you have Splatoon 2 on your Switch, I mean, I'd recommend go checking that out. And also, it's included for free of the Switch Online expansion pack. So if you
Right,
have
yeah.
that, then, I mean, you can just download that and get more single player stuff. I think it's the most challenging Splatoon single player content as well. So check that out. But yeah, Splatoon 3, we got a new season upon us. I believe December 1st is when that starts. So we got some more stuff coming up. And then I saw this splash across the Resetera forums on Wednesday morning, but every issue of Nintendo Power is now available to download on the Internet Archive. Did you see that?
No, I'm gonna go do that. I love Nintendo Power. I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted to write for video game magazines.
Yeah, that was one of like the ones that I read growing up. It was always like Nintendo Power, EGM, Game Pro, and then like eventually I found Game Informer and other things. Like I loved official Dreamcast magazine, official Xbox magazine. Like as they started rolling out more, there was a Sega magazine I used to read. So yeah, there's a lot of, but like Nintendo Power holds a very special place in my heart. This
Same.
doesn't seem official in any way, by the way. So, but you can download issues 1 through 100 or 1 through 285. And according to the uploader, it was taken from various collections because none of the collections that he found were complete.
Mm.
But if you want to download the full archive, I looked into it. It looks like it's 40 gigabytes. So have a little bit of space on your hard drive, but that's not too bad. And
That's a bigger than a Wii U hard drive.
it is. You can't download it on your Wii U, unfortunately, unless you buy one of those SD cards. But the issues, it's interesting to see how long the magazine ran for because it covers everything from the NES all the way up to the early days of the Wii U, which is wild to think about. Like that magazine was around for that long. I know we write for Game Informer, which has been around for, at this point, 31 years, but it's still like, you think of Nintendo Power and it feels like such an old thing at this point, but it was around until the Wii U. So it 9-10 years ago was how like the last time that Nintendo Power was published.
Yeah.
What was the first issue that you got of Nintendo Power? Do you remember?
Oh man, I'd have to look like at the cover sort of gallery. I still have I have their final issue. Like I have a
Oh,
stack of like I have all the Game Informers that I was in. I have that final Nintendo Power, and then I have a couple other like one other random magazine that I was published in like Europe, right? Like this. So like, but my first one, I think Mega Man was on the cover, if I remember. I was very young. I
so were
remember
you
really being
published in
fascinated by it.
Nintendo Power?
No, 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 no,
Oh,
no, no.
okay.
It was. I'm sorry. It was confusing. I'm not sure what it was like. There was a different magazine that I just wrote one 3DS review for during my freelance days. But Nintendo Power was very internal. Like I don't think they were ever taking freelance pitches at Nintendo Power.
I don't know if maybe they were at the end because I remember when they went under, I was like, because Future took over publishing duties
Right.
after a long time of Nintendo publishing it internally. So I wrote freelance for Official Xbox Magazine, which was also run by Future. And I remember when Nintendo Power went under, it was right as I was kind of getting into freelancing, and I was like, oh man, that would have been so cool to have like even just one byline in Nintendo Power. That would have been like the dream.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it never happened. But we have one more piece of news to get to, Kyle, before we're going to take our first break. We started the show talking about the Wii U turning 10 years old, but we have another big anniversary to celebrate. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is it your birthday?
No, but it is the anniversary of Shigeru Miyamoto's birth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he turned 70 years old this week, and
And he's gonna stop, right? He's not gonna age anymore because he can't. He just needs to live
no.
forever.
We have found the cure for aging, and it only works on one person. We are going to give it to Shigeru Miyamoto
I
because
mean,
he
if
needs to
there's
stay
one
around forever.
person we gotta give it to.
I mean, he's largely stepped away from directing like a while
Yeah.
ago, really, but he still holds a very important role at Nintendo, where he basically oversees a lot of creative endeavors. And but really, like, this raises the question: how much longer do you think we have of Shigeru Miyamoto working at Nintendo?
It's a question that I genuinely don't like thinking about.
I know
Um,
it's such a
I mean,
sad thing to think of him
I
not being at Nintendo.
of course I want him to retire comfortably and like take a break. But it will be a sad day when he leaves the industry, and an even sadder day when he passes away. Which
Oh,
is
don't
let's not think
even.
about that. That's
Let's.
like 50 years from now.
I remember the sadness our office had when Satoru Iwata passed away. 'Cause like, we were in the office when that news came across, and it was just like such a bummer and such like a sad rest of the day, and really like it carried into the next day. That's how down we were about that news.
Yeah, I remember it happened on a Sunday. Um, and I was covering weekend news at the time, and it was like 7 p.m. on a Sunday. And I remember, Brian, you texted me, and my reaction was like, "Man, I'm signed off. Like, what? You just texted me about like some minor thing that can wait till Monday?" And then I remember it was like, "Oh, no, nope. This is a big deal. We need to get something about this on the site right away. This is important."
Okay, so maybe you're remembering it better than I did, because I thought we were in the office. Maybe I'm just thinking of like
No,
the
I mean it
morning
was
meeting after, because
yeah.
again, it was a Monday morning, so we probably had a meeting. Everybody was just kind of like down in the dumps. But
No, it
for,
definitely happened on a Sunday night. Like I
and
very distinctly remember. I wrote the sort of
obituary kind
the
of.
obituary on the site, and then we all discussed it on Monday, and prepped a piece to have in the magazine.
That's
But it was
right. Yeah,
it
that
was sad. It was
that
very
is how it
sad.
played out. You're right. But yeah, so back to the land of the living with Shigeru Miyamoto. He did mentor a lot of younger developers who've gone on to do great work. I mean, he has mentored. He's not. He's still around, just to be clear.
Yeah, he's
Um,
doing great.
but probably most notably Eiji Aonuma and Yoshiaki Koizumi, and he's worked hand in hand with Takashi Tezuka since the very beginning. And can you consider him kind of like a mentee of Miyamoto, even though he's worked with him from the beginning? Like, I looked it up,
Tezuka?
and Tezuka's a good deal younger than Miyamoto. He's 61 right now. I don't know. Does that count as a mentorship? Even though I think they're probably closer to equals in terms of like their creative endeavors and like careers.
Yeah, I would think closer to equals. I think they were probably sort of pursuing the same creative things at Nintendo around the same time. Um, Yeah, I mean Miyamoto sort of gets the credit of like being the person who drew Mario, right? Who created Mario, but I mean Tezuka, he has his own really impressive list of credits, that are also important.
I mean, yeah, Tezuka is the director of Link to the Past and the director of Super Mario World and Yoshi's
Yeah,
Island, and it's like, all right, yeah, that guy's amazing as well. But 70 years of Shigeru Miyamoto. I mean, obviously we've had him in the video game industry for what, 40 years at this point?
yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Something like that, like 40, probably like closer to 45 if you count like probably the work he was doing prior to like the launch of games like Donkey Kong and eventually the Mario games. But it's just been an amazing run for Shigeru Miyamoto, and I'm just hope he had the happiest of birthdays, I guess is what the point of this this celebration here is. But is there really anything else we can say about Shigeru Miyamoto other than the fact that he's probably the most influential figure in the video game industry's history?
yeah. I mean, I think that's a fair statement. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and 70 years. That's a huge milestone, and I hope that we have him working at Nintendo. I mean, as long as he's happy doing it. It seems like his role now is much less involved than it has been in the past. So, if he's happy, he's still raking in the paychecks, and he's able to keep going. I hope that he continues working at Nintendo for as long as he possibly can, because he is just he's a genius when it comes to
Yeah.
making video games and knowing what players want. I mean, he's ultimately responsible for so many of the games that we've loved over the years, and I hope that he continues working and being happy.
Yes. Yeah, that's the important thing. We've
that is
got to
the
keep that
happy.
Miyamoto smile.
Yes, and like you've met him before a couple times, right?
Yeah, I've had the privilege to do like one or two interviews with him. I think I've had the chance
Okay.
to do. Yeah.
I've only met him once, and he every time that I've seen him, but also like the time that I met him, he is exactly the kind of guy that you want to have created Mario. Like he's just a
Yeah,
jolly little guy, and like
always
he's
happy, always smiling. Yeah.
yes, except for that one time that Matt Helgeson wrote about on our website, where the time I saw Shigeru Miyamoto's Dark Side or whatever. Did you see that
Yeah.
article?
Oh, of course. Yeah. No, I'm sure. I mean, that's the kind of the feedback you get from people who've worked with him is like he's very jovial and very smart and creative, but like, he really demands a lot from the people that work with him.
I mean, you get the results, so
Yeah.
it's hard to argue with that. Kyle, I know you're a very busy man, so I'm going to allow you to step away for a little bit here. Come back for the final segment to continue celebrating the Wii U. In the meantime, we are going to take a quick break, and when we get back, I'll be joined by Game Informer's Charles Harte to break down all the things Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. We will be right back. Last week, this main segment was all about Sonic Frontiers, and this week it's a new entry of another one of my all-time favorite franchises, Pokémon. Pokémon Scarlet and Violet are officially out today, kicking off the 9th generation of the series. Not only do we have a whole new slate of monsters to catch, but this game gives us something we longtime fans have been waiting for a long, long time, an open world. Joining me to talk all about Pokémon Scarlet and Violet is Game Informer Associate Editor Charles Harte. Charles, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great.
I'm so happy to have you back on here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about Pokemon, which is one of my favorite pastimes.
Yes, so we've been playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet for just over a week now at this point, and we're going to be talking a bit more about the open world and all the new Pokemon and everything in this segment. But first, Charles, I want to get your high-level overall impressions of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet.
Yeah, I'm definitely enjoying my time with it. I just generally like Pokemon, and I think the core formula is there enough that I'm like, yep, it's Pokemon. I love playing it. I think it's different in some really cool ways, and I think my only other like broad thing is that it does kind of chug on the Switch. I think that's probably my biggest criticism, that kind of takes away from the experience for me, but not so much so that I haven't enjoyed the game at all.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the performance is very, very lacking. Like, this might be the worst performing Pokemon game that I've played. Like, Pokemon Legends Arceus, I definitely criticized that back in January when it came out as like, hey, this thing doesn't really run super well on Switch. I would say this takes that to the next level.
Yeah. It's we briefly talked about on the Game Informer show. It's distracting was the word Kyle used that I thought was good. Of like, I want to ignore it. I don't want to think about it because it's not really a thing I care about. Is like, flashy graphics or like running at a locked frame rate the entire time. But it's a lot.
That is a good way to put it, I think, because it's hard to remain immersed in this open world. Like, I love like riding around on my legendary Pokemon, exploring all the nooks and crannies this world has to offer, and like be like, oh my god, there's this Pokemon over here in this corner. I didn't even know he was in this area. And like, you're getting super immersed, and then like you're riding through, and it's like suddenly a Pokemon just pops up in front of you, and then like you see it, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go check that out, and then you go over and it like phases out of existence because but like it's still there, but like it's blinking in and out of existence because it just can't render for that long or whatever. Like, and like, the frame rate really chugs when there's one big open water area that I got to that like, it's a part of one of the main stories. And it was gameplay affecting, I think is the best way to put it. Usually it's distracting, like the performance, but this time it was like, I guess maybe because it was like a lot of water that was being rendered. And also there were several Pokemon like swimming in the water. And then there was like other stuff happening. And it just like, it was such a performance dip that I was having a hard time like moving on the menu, because it was like, wow, this is really chugging right now. But most of the time it's not that way. And also, full disclosure, Pokemon Company is promising a day one patch, which we have not played yet because it just isn't available to us as of this recording. Also not available to us as of this recording is the 4-player co-op. But the day one patch is said to improve some of the performance stuff. I'm going to test it out before I publish my review. You can see my full review impressions up on GameInformer.com right now, but my full scored review won't be up until a later date. But let's talk a little bit about kind of like the individual elements of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. The big thing being the open world. So how did you find the design of the open world to be?
I don't know if this is separate from it, but it's similar enough to me of seeing the Pokemon in the open world. I think helped me explore more of seeing, like, I just want to, poke my head in here to see what's there. And then I find myself, being drawn to an area that maybe doesn't make sense for me to go from a plot perspective. But I think it's cool. I think it largely works. I really like, there's a lot of items in the open world.
Yeah.
And it's just fun to run around and pick up some Pokeballs and potions or whatever. And then as you're running around, be like, oh, I didn't know that you could find this Pokemon here, or I didn't know that this was there. And yeah, I think I did try to go out of my way to be like, okay, how open world is this? And tried to skip a bunch of stuff to see if the levels would scale. And it did not.
I feel like it does to an extent, because like I did the same thing as you, and I tried to break the game as much as I could to see, like, push the limits of this open world. And I made it pretty far, and I was like, okay, I'm out leveled now, but not like drastically so. And then I went back there, and I felt like the Pokemon were a little bit higher level. Like, they didn't like it wasn't like, all right, well, you're level 27 now, so all the Pokemon are going to be level 27. Like, no, it's not going to be that way. And yes, it's a weird balance that they have to play, because on one hand, like, they don't want you going and being like, all right, well, I'm only level 15. I'm going to go to like the end game area and catch like all these amazing Pokemon that are going to be level 15. And then I just have like this all-star squad that's able to go with me wherever I go. And also, like, every RPG ever has had like basically level gating, right? Where it's like, all right, well, I don't know about you, but when I played The Witcher 3, I definitely went to some places that I wasn't supposed to be at and got absolutely wrecked. I mean, the same thing could be said about Elden Ring, the game that seems to be the front runner for Game of the Year this year. And I don't want to be like dropping the hammer too hard on Pokemon in that regard, but I think that, like, they do a good job of doling out the levels. Like, I never felt like I was drastically out leveled, except for when I intentionally went out of my way to be like, screw you, I'm going to this gym instead, or I'm going to go to this Team Star base instead, or I'm going to go catch Pokemon in this area instead. It's like, as long as I followed kind of the natural flow of the world, I always felt appropriately leveled.
Yeah, I guess to clarify even more, I felt like it didn't scale very well when I went out of my way to like try to avoid going to a place. I remember specifically getting to a path and it was blocked by Team Star, and then I realized I could jump off the cliff and land in the desert there to get past the blockade, which is definitely what I was not supposed to do. But I do think if you're playing it and just trying to go through it naturally, I haven't really had any problems with that. If anything, it's kind of I mean, it's a thing in Elden Ring too. If you enter an area, realize, oh, I maybe shouldn't be here. I don't have the tools to traverse this. And then going back to another place and going in a different direction is usually just the solution there. But yeah, I think it is more compatible with the Pokemon formula than I expected it to be. I don't really know what I thought it would be, but I think it works.
Yeah, and something you touched on a little bit here, but like having the Pokemon out in the world, like there's no more random encounters. You don't even have to. You don't even get like the trainer battles unless you want them. You have to go up to the trainers now and initiate it. Similar to the wild Pokemon. You see the wild Pokemon out in the world, unless they like bum rush you, which sometimes they do. Sometimes they'll see you and they'll just like make a beeline for you. And other times like they'll actually run away from you. But like, largely you are in control of when you encounter either a wild Pokemon or a trainer. But the fact that you see the wild Pokemon roaming about, there's no more like, oh, you're in the tall grass, so like here's a random encounter. That is a thing of the past completely. And seeing the Pokemon is what ultimately led me to just lose hours upon hours exploring this open world, because I'd be like, oh, there's that Pokemon. Oh, wow, I didn't know that Pokemon was here. I'm going to go over here. And then you see like, as you get further out of that area, or like the outer areas of that like one region, you start seeing the Pokemon in the next area over, and you're like, oh, I want to go check that area out. And then, like it just becomes like this long, like almost like the Pokemon equivalent of like a Wikipedia or a YouTube tunnel, where you like you start off researching like, oh, how long has McDonald's been around? And then you click into like a million things, and next thing you know, you're reading about like, I don't know, like the Ottoman Empire, and you're like, I don't know how I got here, but like through like thorough exploration of one area, it led me to the exploration of another area, and then that led to another area, and then before you know it, you're finding Dragonite, like just kind of hanging out and being like, all right, well, I guess this is where life has taken me at this point.
Yeah, and for me, I find I'm catching way more Pokemon than I usually do. I'm not usually a Pokédex person, and maybe it's a leftover instinct from playing Legends Arceus, but like I get into an area and I'm like, oh, there's all these cool Pokemon around, and I can just see them. For some reason, that's just, I feel so much more incentivized, especially when, you're in an area and if I'm using like an old Pokemon area, so like Viridian Forest in like the original games, there's Caterpie and there's Metapod and there's all these different things, and then like occasionally there's a Pikachu, and something about seeing like the one rare Pokemon peeking out in like a sea of other ones that you see, I'm like, well, I gotta get that one because who knows if I'm ever gonna see it again.
Yes. That's what actually hurt my soul so much when I was doing like the going out of my way to see how like open the open world truly was. It was like I got to the area where like the Pokemon were out leveling me, and like I was like, oh, well, I've got to catch that Pokemon. And then I would go up to it and it would be like, oh, well, it just breaks out of the Pokeball immediately, because based on the gym badges that you have is how easy it is to catch Pokemon of a certain level. So like you get one badge and it's like, all right, well, Pokemon 20 and below will not only obey you, which is has how it's always been, but now they will be easier to catch. So that's kind of another way they level gated a little bit. But there are, we've kind of danced around it to this point, but there are 3 mission chains that you can pursue in pretty much any order you want. So there's Victory Road, which is the like the gym battle, the traditional 8 gyms. You go around the region, battle the 8 gym leaders. There's Path of Legends, which is going around, I believe there's 5 Titans.
Yes.
And then there is Starfall Street, which is the Team Star bases, which is kind of like the antagonistic group of this game. You go around and challenge their bases, and it ultimately amounts to basically a gym battle against like the head of the base. And it's I had fun going around doing all these missions. I think that each one has a little bit of BS related to it. I think that like the gym challenges that you have to do before you can take on the gym leader, it's weird how they're like, all right, well, obviously their thinking was, let's do something that diversifies the gameplay. It's not just, all right, here, battle a gauntlet of gym trainers in order to get to the gym leader. But then ultimately, like 3 or 4 of them wind up being, all right, just battle a bunch of gym trainers to get to the gym leader. And the ones that don't do that, some of them are fun. Like there's one where you have to like slide down a hill, and like it's almost like a little like snowboarding mini game almost. And then there's one that like it's like you have to find like a secret recipe or a secret menu item to order off the menu. And like that's how it ultimately informs like the gym leader that you've completed the challenge, and like piece together the puzzle that they wanted you to solve. Other ones like, all right, well, who knows? Like go find all these Sunfloras. Like that was kind of like it felt like a waste of time.
Yeah, I think when I was learning about the game before I played it all, it kind of gives the implication of like, which path will you choose, as if they're like 3 distinct prongs, but it's you kind of are always doing all 3 of them at the same time, and you kind of need to, I don't think Team Star will block areas off if you don't beat them. But yeah, I think I agree with you about the weird stuff beforehand. I did want to say that in a way I was not expecting, I've really enjoyed like the story from the aftermath of some of these. I think the Titan Pokemon story, I didn't think anything of it, and then I think beat like the second one, I was like, oh, this has a whole other layer I didn't really realize.
Yes.
I think Team Star is interesting in such that if you've played lots of other Pokemon games, there's kind of this idea of like, oh, this is a group of criminals and they want to, flood the world or steal Pokemon or do something bad, and you have to stop them because what they're doing is morally wrong. And in this instance, it's like the more you learn about them, the more I'm like, oh, I don't really understand who these people are or what their deal is. And that's honestly never really been a consideration for me in a Pokemon game before. I'm surprised by how much I like the characters in these games.
I would agree with you. Like, there's some emotional backing to the stories of these characters, and we're going to remain as spoiler-free as possible while also breaking down this game. But yes, there are various story beats that caught me off guard with how much I cared about it, right? Like, the Path of Legends, which was the Titan Pokemon in particular, has like a story element to it that I was like, oh, this is actually kind of hitting me a little hard.
Yeah.
But what that made me think of is like, God, I wish there was voice acting in these games because it would hit me that much harder. I feel like if I wasn't like reading the subtitles basically and like being like, all right, yeah, this feels like an RPG from the late 90s.
Yeah, it's especially weird in the cutscenes where it's animated and like timed as if you're waiting for the voice lines to go through. I would agree with that. It feels notably missing.
I mean, that was something that I criticized Sword and Shield for, and then here we are 3 years later with Scarlet and Violet, and you know the game is substantially bigger than Sword and Shield in terms of like what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to do to make a true console Pokemon game, and we're still very limited in the animations, very limited in the sounds. I mean, the music in this game slaps. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that at all. The music is amazing in this game. But the voice acting just is like a completely like there's no voice acting whatsoever. So it just feels like it sticks out like a sore thumb, you know, when everything else is being modernized. The lack of better animations and the lack of voice acting really kind of break you out of the immersion in ways I wouldn't say as badly as like the technical stuff, but like it's semi-comparable, I think, and like that. Like I'm like super into this storyline. It's like you said, like an animated cutscene kicks in. It's like there should be voices at least here. Yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, I always draw the comparison to like all this stuff is still lagging behind what like Final Fantasy X did in the early 2000s. Like that's a 20-year-old game, and it did voice acting. I mean, you know, you can say what you want about the voice acting of Final Fantasy X, but there are it's something that game had that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet does not have in 2022.
Yeah, it's I was gonna say almost like it's asking you to suspend your disbelief in certain ways of like, yeah, pretend they're talking, and at the same time you're hearing the Pokemon make noise. Like if it was, I feel like there's other things that make sounds that if there was no voice acting, I don't know how to phrase the thing I'm gonna say, but largely yes, I agree with you.
So we've talked a little bit about Victory Road. That's the 8 gym battles. We've talked about Path of Legends, which are basically like just these kind of boss battles that you seek out in the world. And then there's like a story element to it that we both really like. And then there's Operation Starfall, or I guess not Operation Starfall. That's what it's called in the game. But the mission chain is called Starfall Street. And what that is going around to these Team Star bases. And basically they give you a challenge of like, you got to defeat 30 of our Pokemon in 10 minutes, which, by the way, way too much time, but I don't hate it because I would hate to fail that and have to like do it again because it's kind of mundane. Like you just run around and you use the Let's Go functionality, which is hitting the right bumper, and that sends out your 3 Pokemon, like your top 3 Pokemon in your team out to defeat these Pokemon that are just out in the world thrown out by Team Star members. And, you know, you can go back and heal whenever you want. It's like, I understand like the risk reward of that is like, all right, you're going to use time to go back and heal. But like, I don't think I ever went below like the 7-minute mark on the timer countdown.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy. The real challenge comes with these boss battles. I don't know about you, but there were a couple that I got stuck on actually.
Yeah, I think I might have only done 2 so far. But the first one I remember being like, oh, okay, this is how it is. And then the second one was definitely much harder. Yeah, I guess I'll have questions for you outside of, I don't remember whether I can or can't talk about this, but it was more difficult than I was anticipating, especially compared to the part that comes before where you're just kind of pressing the R button and it's automatically beating all these other Pokemon.
Yeah, and one thing I am glad about though is if you lose the gym battle or if you lose the Team Star boss battle, it doesn't make you redo the challenge or doesn't make you redo like the base assault. You just automatically go back. Like you can leave the area, you can go level your Pokemon or whatever, But then when you come back, it's just like you go to like ring the bell to start the process again, and it just automatically dumps you into the battle with the Team Star boss. So that's a good thing, because the final boss or the final Team Star base leader is actually a pretty challenging battle. And I didn't have like the right Pokemon for it initially. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go level all these Pokemon. I went over to an area that had Pokemon that would be good against it. And, came back and made it a much easier battle. But I will say that the new Pokemon in this entry, like in this generation, are probably my favorite, like, batch of new Pokemon in a long time. Like, I was very hit or miss with the new Pokemon introduced in Sun and Moon and Sword and Shield, but I think that these are largely hits for me.
Yeah, I was also pleasantly surprised that I felt like I had seen a lot of Pokemon in the lead up to this, and how many of the new Pokemon I felt were like early in the game of like, oh, I don't know what this is, and I've never seen this one before. And I have like 2 or 3 I have on my team where I just saw them and immediately I was like, yes, you are mine now. Like how this looks. There's a water type in particular I'm a huge fan of.
And the wild Pokemon that you encounter, like, I think it's a good spread of like all the generations, to be honest. Like, I still don't think we're at, I mean, I haven't completed the Pokedex, so I don't know for sure, but I don't think we're at like national Pokedex level, but they really did choose a lot of Pokemon. There's very few that I can think of right off the top of my head that I'm like, oh man, I wish they had that Pokemon in here. I wish they had that Pokemon, but I'm not quite at the post-game area yet, so I don't I can't tell you like for sure that like, oh, well, this Pokemon's not in it or this Pokemon's not in it. But I will say that going back to something you said about the Pokedex, you're catching a lot more Pokemon. The redesign visually of the Pokedex is miraculous in what it does for me. Like, it's all cosmetic stuff. And unfortunately, like, the studying aspect of Pokemon Legends Arceus is gone. Like the where you have to like see them do certain moves in order to fill out your Pokedex. That's gone. Now it's back to like, all right, well, you catch the Pokemon and it fills out their entry completely automatically. But like, it's like a shelf aesthetic, right? Where it's like, it looks like a bunch of encyclopedias on a shelf.
Yeah.
And then each time you catch a Pokemon or each time you encounter a new Pokemon, it like fills in the slots. And it is so satisfying watching the Pokedex fill out as you like encounter and catch more Pokemon. I don't know what it is about it, but it hits a part of my brain that like the traditional Pokedexes haven't.
Yeah, it's like the difference between like reading a dictionary and reading like a magazine of photography. Like, it's before it was never a thing where I would get a Pokemon and then I would never go through the Pokedex and be like, oh, I wonder if I could learn some interesting facts about Charmander. But now it's like, I'll catch Pokemon and be like, whoa, what was that art real quick on the, like, the Smoliv page or whatever. I want to go back in and see what that looks like. And sometimes you can see like alternate forms of the Pokemon in that thing. Like, if they have different male and female ones, they'll be like, well, we have to have both in there. And then I'll look and see like, oh, there's another like version of this Pokemon I haven't seen before. I gotta go find it now.
It's very cool. Like, this is the direction that I want the Pokedex to keep going in. Again, I do miss the Legends Arceus like kind of studying aspect, but I understand like that might not work 100% in a mainline game. But that, I always thought that was a cool thing that made you actually feel like you were studying Pokemon. But trainer battles, I mentioned that they're kind of optional at this point. You have to go up and actually initiate it with the trainers. But with this one, like, they incentivize you in a lot of ways to actually go about and do that. Because there's been times where it's like, I don't want to battle any trainers. I just want to keep going. That's been in all Pokemon games, not just Scarlet and Violet. Like, Pokemon Red and Blue, I'd be like, come on, just let me go past. I don't want to battle you. I just want to keep going. And this does a good job of like being like, all right, well, yeah, you can skip any trainer battles you want in like the fields. However, you get incentivized by money. You get incentivized by experience. You get incentivized by every Pokemon Center. Almost every Pokemon Center has a Pokemon League representative where if you battle a set number of trainers in a certain area, he'll give you a TM or another reward. And that gives you additional incentive to battle these trainers. And, of course, you want to level properly so you get to the gym battles and like you feel like you're capable. But I think that they did a good job of making it so like, yep, 100% optional. You don't have to do these unless like you go up and actually interact with them. But if you do, there's a lot of good stuff waiting for you.
Yeah, I also think you get so much experience, like thinking about it, because it wasn't a thing I was super conscious of. But at some point they introduced, your experience is shared between all the Pokemon in your party, and at some point they introduced when you catch a Pokemon, you get experience. And I find that when I'm going through a route, like my first route or two, I just kind of skipped the trainers, not really thinking about it, but my Pokemon weren't underleveled because I had been catching so many Pokemon. And I don't know if I don't think that would work probably as well for the later areas, but I feel like it's a good balance for like past complaints of like I always feel like I'm over leveled, where it's like you could play this whole game theoretically and never battle another trainer other than the gym leaders and the bosses and stuff. I think that's really cool. I also had the realization that like in Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire or whatever, going through a route, the trainers are like the obstacles, like the mandatory obstacles where you got to fight this person to get through, and the Pokemon were like often an optional challenge you could do if you wanted to, duck into the grass and see what's here. And now it's flipped where optionally you can go and find all the trainers in a route. But you have to weave your way through all of the Pokemon in your path if you want to get from one place to another. I think that's like a cool shift.
Which can be very challenging when you take into account the technical problems of the Pokemon just suddenly like you're riding your legendary Pokemon like a motorcycle and then like, surprise, there's a Pikachu like right in front of you and you suddenly are in a battle with it. Or
especially when they're small.
Yes, it's very hard to see like some of like the bug Pokemon and like some of the grass Pokemon that like look like mushrooms or whatever. Like they are very challenging to find, but like there is always that wow factor when you see like one of your favorite Pokemon just kind of like roaming that you haven't seen before. Like I guess I'll spoil one of the Pokemon. I don't want to spoil anything on this. Like if I can avoid it, but like there was one Pokemon that I was like, oh, I've got to get him. And I went and got it. And like, it was a very tough battle because I was definitely under leveled. This is when I was trying to like a little bit break the open world. And I saw a Pokemon that I was like, I had no idea that Pokemon was in this game. And I went and caught it, even though it was like 15 levels above where I was at that point.
Love that. My boy Phanpy's back. It's my favorite Pokemon.
Really?
He hasn't. I think I looked at like games in which Phanpy is catchable during the main campaign, and it's like Gen 2, so also Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and then like you can get it in the Safari Zone in Gen 3. But other than that, Phanpy does not get that much representation.
He's not in the wild area in Sword and Shield?
I don't believe so.
For some reason, I thought he was. Maybe they added him after the fact.
Maybe I don't know. I also know he's in like the underground in
Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl.
Yes, yeah,
yeah. They've done a good job with the recent entries, adding more Pokemon after the fact. 'Cause I know that's always a big criticism of the community is like, there's not enough Pokemon in this game, and it's like, what are you talking about? There's literally hundreds.
Yeah,
but I get it. Like everybody who has their favorite Pokemon, they have like the area that like the game that they jumped onto the series at a certain point, and they'll always have those Pokemon having a special place in their heart. And I understand like there's an emotional attachment to that. That said, like there are hundreds of Pokemon in this game, and then you can also assume they're going to add some stuff after the fact, like they did with Sword and Shield, where there's probably going to be some sort of expansion. I don't know if it's going to be, I don't know what it's going to be, honestly. Like I don't know how they would expand on this further, given that it's like a big open world, but I'm assuming they're going to do something. But before we move on from like the battling aspect of this, like the terrestrialization, talk to me about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have thought since it was revealed, I guess to explain it, if someone doesn't know, there's new Pokemon mechanic where Pokemon have Terra types, where once per like Pokemon Center visit, you can terrestrialize a Pokemon, and then it will, I think, get stronger, and then its type might change. So usually a Pokemon you catch, the Terra type will just be its main type. So like Terra type Fuecoco is just going to be Fire type again. But you can find some in the wild that are like shining that'll have alternate Terra type. So you might, find a Lechonk that has like an Ice Terra type, and then when you terrestrialize it, it'll turn ice. I personally, for me, playing through the game, it hasn't come up very much, but I'm kind of excited more to see competitively how this impacts the game, because I think it could be really cool to be like, someone sends out a Pokemon that everyone knows how to deal with, like a Pikachu or whatever. They're like, oh, we just use a ground move, but then Pikachu has a flying Terra type and it avoids that, and I think there's a lot of like interesting combinations that could come of that.
So looking back at the various battle gimmicks that we've gotten in recent generations. So we'll start with X and Y with Mega Evolutions.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go next to Sun and Moon, which had the Z moves. And then we'll go to Sword and Shield, which had the Dynamaxing.
Mm-hmm.
All of those, to me, have always felt like push this to win.
Yeah.
Terastallizing doesn't feel that way. It feels more of a strategic move than a push to win move. And I love that. It makes it my favorite battle gimmick in series history.
Absolutely.
Because it's not just like, all right, well, no matter what, like the next move you're doing is going to beat this Pokemon. It's you have to choose the right type. You have to choose the right time, because like I've been like, all right, well, this Pokemon's going to Terastallize and just wipe out this Pokemon in this gym battle. And it does that. And then they send out another Pokemon and it's like, oh crap, I didn't know that Pokemon was coming. And that this Pokemon that I Terastallized is now weak against that Pokemon or whatever. And it's like, you have to be very strategic. It reminds me of like the scene in the first Fast and Furious movie where like one of them uses the NOS. And then like Paul Walker's character is like too soon. And then he hits it and he wins the race. Or I don't know, maybe I'm misremembering that. But that's what it feels like sometimes, where it's like, oh no, I Terastallized too soon. And now that Pokemon's gone. And now my opponent has the Terastallization and I am just like normal Pokemon battling him. Mm-hmm. But like it still is not an insurmountable thing. It's not like Mega Evolutions or Dynamaxing where it's like, all right, that's a huge like advantage in just like firepower, basically.
Yeah.
Like now it feels not only like a more strategic thing in battle, but also strategic in that, like you mentioned, you can only use it once per Pokemon Center visit, which is a huge thing to me, where it's like, all right, I have this challenging battle right here. Should I use the Terastallization? Or like, here's like a wild Pokemon that I really want to catch. Should I Terastallize? It's a little bit over my level. Or should I save it for another wild Pokemon in this area? And yeah, you can fly back to the Pokemon Center whenever you want and come back. But I love that it's a very limited thing. It's not like every battle I get to use it. And it's also more strategy than push to win.
Yeah, it feels very meaningful when you decide to Terastallize. Yeah, I think that's how it should be. I think it's a good mechanic.
That said, I think that the Pokemon look incredibly stupid when they're Terastallized. Like, fair. Yeah, give them like the gem-like appearance, but now all of a sudden, like Pikachu has a hot air balloon like coming out of his skull, or whatever Pokemon has like a flower because they're a grass Terra type. And like, I do like that there's like some differentiation between like, all right, this is their new type. So you have like a visual indicator that this Pokemon is now a different type if they are in fact a different type. But like they look just incredibly dumb.
Yeah, it's I think the ground Terra type is you put like half of a globe on your head. I love that.
Or it looks like a mountain, like a diorama almost, like sprouting out of their skulls, and it looks very, very silly. But yeah, it is my favorite battle gimmick to this date, or to this point. But another thing I wanted to touch on, speaking of the Pokemon Centers, is that you can now craft TMs. And I think that that's something that, like I said, like there's incentives to battle the trainers out in the fields. That is an incentive to take on the wild Pokemon because they drop materials, which it kind of seems a little bleak, I guess, that like you just knock out a Pokemon and they like you drop like, you know, there's
their fur.
Yeah, like their fur is falling off, and it's like, did I stress them out that much? But like it's interesting to like gather around, like you actually have to seek out certain Pokemon in order to get their materials, and then you take their materials back and you can craft TMs, which I think is a good way to further play on this theme of like kind of freedom in how you want to approach this, because like you just basically are presented with a menu based on like how many quests you've done in the storylines, and based on that menu you can like choose, all right, I have enough materials for this and enough materials for that.
Yeah, I think it's also like the game I've found has been very good at finding ways to incentivize the players to like engage with its mechanics. So in this instance, it's like, yeah, you could skip over all the wild Pokemon if you want, but then you won't be able to craft TMs. And the same with the trainers. It's like you can skip all the trainers, but you won't get experience and you won't get like the special Pokemon League rewards. I think it's honestly, I liked infinite TMs when that was a thing in the past, but I do feel like this makes more sense to me just in terms of like resource management. And I do have like I think I found a TM for Charge Beam, and I could see I need feathers from this Pokemon, and then just question marks. And I'm like, oh, I have no idea what this is. I want to teach my Pokemon Charge Beam, and kind of incentivize me to be like, okay, I didn't catch, this electric Pokemon. Maybe this is the one that has it. Just like looking for stuff. And then also, I think the other thing is when you can find TMs, on the ground. And once you find one, you learn the recipe for it. So you might find a really good TM that you want to teach to 2 of your Pokemon. And you can teach it to one, but you're going to have to find the stuff for the other. And if it's like a really good TM, you might not have found those Pokemon yet, which is I just think it's cool.
Yeah. And I don't know how far you are in the story, but do you like the way the story is going so far?
I think I might be exactly halfway. I know I've done 4 gyms. I think I've done 4 gyms, 3 Titans, and 2 Starfall Streets. So that's 9 out of 18.
Okay.
I have liked the side quests, I suppose. I really like the characters. I think that's a thing. I think Nomona is fun, and there's big stairs in front of the academy. And as she goes up, she's like, all right, time to climb the worst staircase in the world.
Yeah,
I'm like,
she has a great personality.
So many stairs. Yeah, I mean, as a whole, I don't mind. I think it's very Pokemon. I've been more touched by like specific moments. I really like Arvin than I have been as a whole, I think.
Yeah, the story is kind of like just like it's a sum of its parts, right? Where it's like, all right, well, the Starfall Street forms this part of the story, and the Path of Legends forms this part of the story. And then, of course, there's the overarching gym story, and then the emergent stuff that comes from filling out your Pokedex. So I don't think there's really an overarching story until you get near the very end, in which case then it all kind of, I don't think it's too spoilery to say it all kind of comes to a head as you would expect a Pokemon story to do. But like, most of this game, it is just kind of like these disparate parts of these different quest lines that you're completing individually, and then that pieces together the overall story. But I'm liking it like overall. I think like it's a story that like I started off like, all right, yeah, whatever. I'm attending this academy, and then like they send you off, and like the academy really feels like an afterthought. I will say that.
Have you done classes?
I did a couple, and it's like, oh, this gives me nothing.
Yeah, it's like in the old like Pokemon trainer schools in like earlier gens where you can go in and click on the blackboard. And I remember being, like 12 and being like, oh, that's burn lowers your attack. That's really interesting. And now like actually knowing them, clicking on a thing to like take a biology class, and then you sit through it. And then he's like, just so you know, you can press ZR in the field to throw a Pokeball. All right, that's all I have time for today. This class has been 5 minutes long.
I was thinking that it was going to like give some sort of reward for sitting through the classes. So I like finished one class line all the way through, and I was like, oh, there's nothing here. It's just like a tutorial that you can take. But the school itself feels like an afterthought, aside from like, all right, well, Team Star is a bunch of like kind of like dropouts from the school. And then like some of the other characters, like Nomona is a person who goes to the school, and like she's kind of like your accompaniment to the gyms. And then Arvin is an upperclassman at the school. All the characters are from the school, but the school itself doesn't feel like the backdrop to the story that I think the Pokemon Company was kind of marketing it as in the lead up to the launch.
I also have encountered battling trainers. I didn't really process it till today. There's a wide range of ages of people who go to the school. I found like clearly middle-aged trainers wearing the school uniform.
And it's like student cool. Maria wants to battle, and it's like, okay, yeah, sure.
Student Maria, I know your daughter's in my biology class.
I mean, I thought maybe it's like a university where like, sometimes like when you're in college, like you go and like there's some people who maybe are coming back to school after several years away from high school. Maybe it was always their dream to get a college education, and like I was 18 in this class, and there was a 33-year-old in my class, and it's like, all right, maybe it's one of those situations, but it's kind of geared like almost like a private like middle school or high school, like a prep school almost is how it's like framed in the story. But there are definitely characters in the school that are a lot old. Like Arvin seems like a different age bracket than your character. And like Nomona, you're like, up to her torso in terms of like your height. So I know that like back in like middle school, like girls got a lot taller before guys did in a lot of cases, but like that was taking it a little bit extreme. So I think that it is a bit of an age gap in the academy, but I don't know what's quite going on there. Because like you said, you'll go there and there's somebody who is very clearly like in their 30s or 40s, and it's like student so-and-so wants to battle, and yeah, sure, whatever, you're a student at this academy too. But is there anything else you want to talk about with Scarlet and Violet before we get out of here?
I think I mostly got it. I think I don't want to talk about it too much because it's not fun to talk about, but I do think I'm really hoping we get more patches of the game, because I think that's been the main thing kind of holding me back on really being all in on it, is just the performance issues. And I'm excited to see. I think the game underneath that is very good, and I have enjoyed my time with it. But yeah, I think that's my final takeaway.
Yeah, and there is a day one patch apparently coming that is going to not only, I think, fix some performance issues, but also activate the servers, and which will enable us to play some co-op. So as of this recording, I have not published my full review because I want to get my hands on that patch prior to rendering my final verdict. And as such, we haven't had a chance to play the co-op. So,
yes.
And also I haven't had time to fully explore like the end and post-game content, but you can read my review in progress impressions on GameInformer.com right now, and then look for my full review in coming days. Charles, I'm ready to cut you loose, but before you get out of here, can you tell people where to find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChuckDuck365.
We are going to take one final break for this episode. When we get back, Kyle Hilliard's going to be rejoining the show, and we'll be ending the episode with definitive ranking and the eShop Gem of the Week. We will be right back. We are back, and it is time for Definitive Ranking, a recurring segment where we take a Nintendo topic and give our personal top 5 lists. Kyle Hilliard is back, and since we spent the beginning of the first segment talking about the 10-year anniversary of the Wii U, Kyle, I want Definitive Ranking this week to be focused on our top 5 Wii U games overall. So start at 5, count it down to 1, give me a sentence or two about each.
My number 5 is Pikmin 3. I'm not the biggest Pikmin fan in the world. I like them fine. I beat 2. I played a little bit of 1, but 3 I enjoyed the most. It's probably my favorite in the series, and it was like one of those, like we were talking about earlier, like it was one of the ones that I was like, oh, this is really nice to see in HD, and also it took good advantage of the touchscreen in a way that I appreciated and made me enjoy it more, to the point where I wasn't even really that interested in replaying it on Switch when it got ported.
Now, Kyle, I've never played a Pikmin game. Am I missing out?
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, I'm not the world's biggest Pikmin fan. It's like it's basically like an RTS to a certain degree. But it's cool. I mean, I like it. It has that Nintendo polish. It's got kind of an interesting, it's kind of post-apocalyptic world, which is kind of a fun background element of the game. But it's not one that I would like, I don't know, just off the top of my head, Brian, I would say, like, if someone hadn't played Majora's Mask, I would be like, what are you doing? Go play Majora's Mask. I don't feel that strongly about Pikmin.
Well, if only they would put the 3DS version, or if I had infinite amount of time, I would play Majora's Mask on the N64 app.
The sequel to one of your favorite games of all time.
Correct. Maybe I'll just skip Tears of the Kingdom, because I've talked about this before.
But skip Tears of the Kingdom.
My top 3 games are all games that are in long-running series that don't typically get direct sequels, but they all have direct sequels. It's Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time, Final Fantasy X. They all have direct sequels. And I haven't played any of those direct sequels. I haven't played Final Fantasy X-2. I haven't played Majora's Mask. And obviously I haven't played Tears of the Kingdom yet. I'm just going to skip Tears of the Kingdom to keep the tradition going strong.
Yeah. You know what you do, dude? You need to super replay it. You just need to commit yourself to it. I'll join you. We'll play it together.
Oh, God.
That's what we need to do.
I would do that if you would be like a guide, because I know you've played it a few times and you could help me through. Because I know it's like a very cryptic like experience in terms of like where you need to go and everything, and
a little bit, yeah.
I almost worry about getting frustrated by that.
Look, loose plan, some point in the future, we should really consider that, like where you play and I just join you and help you, so that way you can get past those pressure points, you know.
Well, that's good because neither of us is very busy. So,
No,
like,
I think I'm gonna dive into one this week. Teaser. We'll see. I might start a
hmm,
super replay with Marcus.
interesting. Well, that piques my interest. But let's move on to number 4.
So am I just sharing my list and then you're gonna share yours? Or?
That's how we'll do it.
Okay, I just didn't remember how it worked. My number 4 is Mario Kart 8 for Wii U. The Switch port is very good, and I played it a lot. But like Mario Kart 8 just like blew me away. I was always a passive Mario Kart appreciator. I think we've talked about it in depth on another one of my other appearances on
Your
podcast.
last appearance was talking about the history of Mario Kart on its anniversary.
Yeah, like always enjoyed them. Great multiplayer games, but 8 just was like I had just as much fun playing that game myself as I did with others, and I just like did everything that I could do short of like the really difficult stuff, beating it on the hardest speeds and stuff like that. But yeah, Mario Kart 8 was like this Mario Kart revelation for me.
The Mario Kart Revelation. That's my least favorite book in the Bible.
That's the subtitle for like half of video games, I feel like.
So wait, going back to, I'm stuck on the Pikmin thing here because you're not a fan of Pikmin. You like Pikmin 3 a lot, but your last time you were on this show is because you brought up Mario Kart, so that immediately had me thinking back to your last appearance. Your eShop gem of the week was Tinykin, which is a directly inspired by Pikmin experience.
Yeah, and you know why I think I like that is because it strips out the things I don't like about Pikmin.
Ah, okay.
And it focuses on the things like, because I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm not a fan. Like I like Pikmin. I'm going to play Pikmin 4. I'll be happy to do so. But there's always little frustrations I have, and Tinykin is great. Like Tinykin will be on my like end of the year list. I'm pretty confident. And that's because it's like, oh, this is the things I like about Pikmin, stripped of the things I find frustrating. So yeah.
You know what? Fair enough. Let's go on to number 3.
Number 3, Rayman Legends. A fantastic 2D platformer, one of the best. And the Wii U version is the best version of that game. Whether you're playing co-op or whether you're playing by yourself, the way you use the touchscreen to interact on certain levels is fantastic. And they kind of did some workarounds for the other consoles, and they're fine. It's still a great platformer, but the best version is still the Wii U version.
That's what you said earlier on, so that brings us to number 2.
Number 2, Super Mario Maker, the first Mario Maker. I reviewed that one for Game Informer, and it works really well, right? It did the thing that the sequel couldn't really do, which is like the novelty of getting to create your own Mario levels was just like sort of unmatched, and the kind of impact that game had, even though it was on a console that wasn't like widely played, like was huge. Like it was so cool to see it's like the thing that creation style games like dream of, is that like all these people are making different things and sharing their creations online, and like people would make these really challenging levels for other people to attempt. It's like the kind of thing that like Little Big Planet never quite achieved, even though Little Big Planet is great and I love Little Big Planet, but just like being sort of tuned into Mario Maker on Wii U when it launched was really exciting. And the Mario Maker 2 just never quite hit those same notes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Mario Maker, you're not going to have a bigger fan on Game Informer of Mario Maker than me, but apparently I am, because you have it higher on your list than I do. But I think it's just because my number 1 and 2 are pretty peerless. But yeah, Mario Maker was such a novel concept, and like it was something that I would do as a kid. Is I would like build my own Mario levels. I have notebooks. I found them in my storage unit where I have Mario levels that I created in a notebook. And I was thinking it would be a fun feature to like go back and try to recreate some of them in Mario Maker. But now it's like Nintendo basically let Super Mario Maker 2 die on the vine. So I don't know if there's really any impact to that or any juice behind that idea anymore. But yeah, I love Super Mario Maker so much. I love Super Mario Maker 2 a lot as well. And unfortunately just didn't get like the sales that I think Nintendo was hoping for that second game.
I mean, I think it was still a success probably by most measures, but just like the lack of the touchscreen, I think kind of just hurt it a little bit in some weird ways, And plus it's a sequel, it's like, oh, we've seen most of this stuff before.
Sure. But, most people haven't because the Wii U.
Yeah.
But I guess that leaves number 1 for you.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably some there's probably some ones on my list that people are probably surprised about, which I think I understand. There's a lot of good games on Wii U, but I think personally, my number one is Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I loved that game.
Such a great game.
I love Donkey Kong Country. It's like, was my sort of major introduction to video games, if that makes sense. Like, I played a lot of video games at friends' houses, but the game that I had first, the game that my brother and I received on like a Christmas morning, we finally owned our own video game console and got to play it, was Donkey Kong Country. And for that reason, that series will always be special to me. And Tropical Freeze was like just like the apex of that style of game. It looked great. It sounded great. The soundtrack is fantastic. It plays so well. I love that game. Like it's one of those ones that didn't really take advantage of the Wii U in a lot of big ways. Like it's one that's like great to play on Switch. If you haven't played it, the Switch version is totally comparable to the Wii U version. But
That's
it's just
funky mode.
Right. Yeah. And actually, genuinely, like playing as Funky is great because that is a challenging game, and Funky kind of lowers the challenge a little bit in a way that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just a fantastic 2D platformer that I adore.
That is a fantastic list, and I'm so glad you mentioned Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, because that is one that was like number 6 for me. I wanted to include that so badly. The Donkey Kong Country series as a whole has a very special place for me. Talked about how the first game was important for me and like kind of playing games with my dad when I was growing up. And, I would love it if they would put Donkey Kong Country Returns on Switch as well, because that game is super fun. The Wii version, I wish it didn't have the motion controls baked in, but the 3DS version, you could just push a button to make Donkey Kong roll and just bring that version over to Switch. And I think that's a hit right there. But
fun fact that the studio that ported that to 3DS is in Minnesota.
Are they still around?
I think so. I guess
I hope so.
Second guess. I think they're mostly making like NASCAR racing games now, but we should give them a call and be like, "Hey, you guys still have like the files or whatever?
Yeah,
right?
I'm
Just bring that over to Switch."
They don't.
I mean, I know a lot about game development, and I bet that's really easy.
Everything in video games is easy. Just remember that. Like if you ever think like, "Oh, well, there's probably a good reason they haven't done that," just be like, "No, they should just push the button and make it happen."
It's just that they haven't thought of it yet. That's
exactly. Number 5 for me is one that I'm surprised was not on your list, and that is Super Smash Brothers for Wii U.
Yeah, do you know why my dumb reason for it not being on Wii U?
Because Ultimate just blows it out of the water?
100%, yeah. Or I'm sorry, not on my list, is because Ultimate is the best version of that game.
100%, yeah. But at the time, like I remember I got a review copy for it, and they sent me a Mario amiibo, because I was like, I don't want to start the habit of collecting amiibos because like it could get out of hand very quickly, and I don't need these little things like cluttering up my house. They sent me the Mario amiibo, and I was like, okay, that is kind of cool. And then I bought like, it slowly became a thing where like my mom got me Link for Christmas that year. And I was like, all right, well now I have Mario and Link. And then like they put out a Pikachu one, and I'm like, well, I really liked Pokemon. And so I got Pikachu, and then they put out a Charizard one eventually. It just slowly accumulated, and now I have 2 full shelves of amiibos.
Now we both have genuine problems. Like it's a real issue for both you and I.
But Super Smash Brothers for Wii U is a terrific game. I remember the 3DS version came out, and I was like, okay, this is fine for a handheld Smash Brothers, but Wii U was like the version that we actually wanted. And of course, Super Smash Brothers Ultimate on Switch is substantially better, and it's just an all-around better version of Smash Wii U. But in its time, Smash Wii U was one of the best games for Wii U.
Oh, yeah. You know what's weird is I actually probably spent more time on the 3DS version.
Well, because
because I got it first.
Yeah, it came out first, and like it was like, oh, this is like the next Smash Brothers game. It's not the better version. It's, by the way, terrific strategy putting that version out before the Wii U version, because the 3DS version, again, it was great for a handheld Smash version or Smash game. However, that was a substantially worse version than what we got with the Wii U, and it was supposed to be like basically the same game.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't even go so far as to say substantially worse. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, it looked a little not as clean, but I thought it played really well. I forget, Brian, were you at Game Informer when that came out, or not quite yet?
Not quite yet. That was like, I think that came out in November 2014, and I joined January 2015.
Okay, because that was a big thing in the office that we just kept finding excuses to make like videos of 8 players Smash.
That was
which
a lot
is
of
like
fun.
amazing. And it's like it's the kind of thing that like is really hard to coordinate in real life. That like I would have never played 8-player Smash outside of the office, and it was fantastic. It was awesome. Like to get 8 people playing that game was phenomenal.
It was. And I remember, speaking of Game Informer's coverage of this thing and excuses to make videos, I remember, I think it might have been you, maybe Ben Reeves, and definitely Ben Hansen made a video about the stage creator. And it was like how to make like the missing stages in the stage creator.
I want to make sure it's properly attributed because it was Ben Hansen and Jeff Cork.
Okay.
And it was very much a they were trying to do the with the NPR painter. Why can't I think of his name?
Bob Ross?
Bob Ross. Yeah, it was the whole bit was like a Bob Ross making Smash Brothers stages thing. It's such a great video.
And I remember I thought it was a serious thing. And I sat down with my Wii U gamepad, put it up on the screen. I'm like, I'm gonna make these stages the way they say you should. And it was a total joke of like, oh yeah, sure, like do this and like
it's hilarious.
Put this landmass over here that sure that represents Pikachu in the Pokefloat stage. And I'm like, this I've been fooled. I've been had by Ben and Jeff.
Gosh, but yeah, go try to track that video down. It's so good.
And then yeah, three months later, I was their coworker, so that was fun.
Hey, all right.
But number 4 for me, Mario Kart 8.
Great
Don't
game.
need to talk any more about that. It's a great game. Number 3, Super Mario Maker. All the reasons we said before.
Great game.
Here's one that we missed on your list: Super Mario 3D World. One of my favorite Mario games, and I know that shocks some people, but I think that it is a great 3D Mario game that borrows the formula and format of a 2D Mario game. And that's what makes it different from the other titles that are like traditional 3D Mario games, like an Odyssey, like a Sunshine, like a 64. This kind of takes like the linear stage format of the 2D Mario games and applies it to the 3D Mario gameplay. And I really love that. And
yeah,
the 3D World in Bowser's Fury on Switch is phenomenal. And I don't know. I remember playing Mario 3D World, and then I was like, that was amazing. And then like later on, people were like, oh yeah, I didn't like Mario 3D World. I'm like, what? I thought like everybody loved that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like on the second half of my list, not in the top 5. And it's mainly because like you're 100% right. It finds the middle ground between 3D and 2D Mario. Mm-hmm. But I just happen to love 3D Mario too much. Like I love Mario Galaxy and Odyssey and Mario 64, that it was like it didn't quite like scratch those itches that I wanted it to. But I mean, I loved it. I 100%ed that game. I beat Victory Road or whatever. Like Champions Road. Excuse me. It's Victory kind of it's a dark memory that I kind of put out of my head because it's a very difficult level. But
by the way, that level
game.
is such a pain to beat. I've never actually beaten it.
Oh, really?
Every other level, 100%ed. That level, not so much.
You should, that's
I've tried as recently as last year. I played through Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury and just couldn't do it.
Let's plug, we're plugging old videos. You can find a video of Dan Reichert and I taking on Champions Road on Game Informer. And we kind of beat it. We sort of run out of time, but we basically beat it.
And then, Kyle, I'm going to cheat a little bit here with my number 1. It's a game that came to Wii U, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
That's cheating, dude. Well, I mean, you didn't even play it.
I did not play the Wii U version, but come on. It's a game that came to Wii U, and we talked about it in the news segment. It's
You're right.
Every bit as good as the Switch version.
Yeah.
But if you want to just do games that I played on Wii U, we can bump everything down 1, and then I'll slot Splatoon as my number 5.
Okay, yeah, Splatoon on Wii U is great.
And that way, all the games that I wanted to shout out, even the ones that didn't fit on my top 5, got mentions. Although I would like to say Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you didn't include those for the same reason I did, is that they're just solid ports, like...
Well, the inventory stuff that we talked about with the second screen.
They're good, then, yeah.
Like, they made the Triforce hunt a lot better.
And the Swift Sail is a big improvement.
Yes. Yeah. So, like, the Wind Waker port is a lot better than, like, the GameCube version. The Twilight Princess one is a fairly straightforward port with just, like, the second screen inventory and everything.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they ported this is really getting in the weeds, but they actually ported the GameCube version, right?
Yes,
So Link is left-handed in the
correct.
Wii U version, right? Okay, yeah, that's cool.
So hopefully they take that stuff and put it on Switch, because I would love those games to arrive on Switch.
Yeah, same.
Kyle, we have one segment left here.
Oh wait, hold on, real quick, one final Wii U shout out.
Yes,
Yoshi's Woolly World. Great,
that is a very good one. Yes,
great Yoshi game. Yeah,
that was on our list of Wii U games we hope come to Switch when we recorded that, I guess earlier. I think it was early this year. It might have been the first episode of this year. Yoshi's Crafted World is on Switch, but not Yoshi's Woolly World.
Oh, right. Weird. Okay.
Yeah, so Yoshi's Woolly World's come to 3DS. Why not also bring it to Switch? It's so easy, right, Kyle?
Yeah, just flip the Switch. That's why they call it Switch.
Yeah, it's just everything just automatically works on it. That's why Dying Light 2 is coming to Switch. You know, it was delayed with a week before launch, and then it's still just the cloud version, but everything just works on Switch. It's easy.
It's all great.
It's terrific. But let's go to the final segment, Kyle. eShop Gem of the Week. Give some shine to a game we wouldn't otherwise talk about on this show.
Right. Okay. So my pick is Save Room, which, do you know anything about this one, Brian?
I have never heard of it until now.
Have you played Resident Evil 4?
I have.
Okay, you know the inventory system in that game where you can rearrange things? It's like a little bit of a Tetris game.
Yeah.
Save Room is that. They just like wholesale pulled that idea out of Resident Evil 4 and made a puzzle game out of it.
That's how pockets work, right? You have like basically a limited amount of space, and you got to make sure everything fits in like together like Tetris pieces.
Yeah, but it's kind of wild. You play it, I was borderline like, are they allowed to do this? Because it looks like Resident Evil 4. It has like you are arranging herbs and stuff like that, and like loading guns to save room on ammo, and even when you press start on the start menu, it goes save room, like Resident Evil style. But it's really cheap. It's like $3. We actually did a new gameplay today for the Xbox version, Marcus and I. It's just like a solid little puzzle game that just takes a cool idea from Resident Evil 4 and kind of blows it out into its own thing. And it's on the eShop. It's good stuff.
Kyle, I'm going to correct you. It is $5.
Oh, what did I say? I
said $3. However, it is currently on sale. 20% discount. It's down to $4.
Yeah, I have the Xbox version, but I'm kind of like, that'd be a good little puzzle game to have on Switch. Maybe I'll play the Switch version.
Came out like a week ago, so
yeah,
it
was on PC for a while, and then recently, last week, came to consoles. So
it sounds like a fun little game, and for $4, you could probably do a whole lot worse. True. I know I've gotten worse cups of coffee for more than that.
Yeah, of course.
But Kyle, I think that's an episode. Thanks for joining me for the Wii U extravaganza and the news segment. And I hope you continue to play Pokemon because, as Charles and I discussed, it is a grand old time, minus the performance issues. But thank you so much to everyone for listening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, throw All Things Nintendo a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to get any questions or comments in, you can get in touch with me at allthingsnintendo@gameinformer.com or hit me up on Twitter or Instagram at Brian P. Shea. And as always, you can join the Game Informer Community Discord, which is a perk for subscribing to our Twitch channel. Kyle, aside from your Champions Road YouTube video, where can people find you on the internet?
On GameInformer.com now. Isn't that weird? It's like
so weird that you're back.
I reviewed Somerville recently, which that game's, I think we'll be talking about that game for a while. It's an interesting game. So check out that review. I reviewed God of War. There's a video review of that. There's good stuff. I'm getting in there. I'm sticking my head into people's business on that website. I'm getting my byline out there.
You're easing back in. You are you're up and running again, I think is the best way to say it. But what about Twitter?
Well, Twitter's not going to exist in like 2 weeks. So
okay, fair enough.
You're welcome to find me there if you want to. I'm not going to tell you my name. You have to go Google it yourself.
Or you could just look in the show notes in your podcast app because it will be there. Kyle, that's our show for this week. Thank you again so much for listening. Take care. We'll see you next time.